Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Event Industry News podcast with me, James Dickson, wishing you all a very good morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you tune in and download or access today's podcast from. I may be stumbling over my words a little bit today for a couple of reasons. Number one, we batch recorded loads and loads of episodes of the podcast in spring ahead of what was going to be a busy year for everybody involved behind the scenes at Event Industry News, at Event Tech Live, with my own business in the events industry. And so this is the first time in a while that I've been back behind the microphone. And it's also the day after England have lost to Spain in the Euro 2024 final. So I will confess at this moment, there were a few Guinnesses taken yesterday afternoon and into the early evening, but, you know, I curbed it once the game had been lost. And it's all sort of serendipity sometimes with this podcast that today I'm going to be welcoming somebody who is, I suppose, an England supporter, but joining me from Spain and from Madrid. So in one of those sort of weird twists of life, you know, you wake up the next morning and go, who's on the podcast today? I've not done one in months. And it all ties in beautifully into the sort of the story of life. And today's one of those sort of organic conversational podcasts. It is a guest who works within the events industry. And really, we don't really have any fixed topic of conversation other than finding out a little bit about our guest. So it's a bit of a dive into things and a bit of an exploration for me and everybody that listens to the podcast regularly as we find out a little bit about our guest and what they do. So let's get on with it. Today we welcome the founder of Beyond the Event, Valentina Ruffoni, who joins us from Madrid today in a beautifully set up and well-equipped professional AV studio, in stark contrast to my own living room here in the north of England. But Valentina, a very warm welcome and good morning to the Event Industry News podcast.
Thank you for having me. Good morning. It's a different day here in Madrid, based on yesterday's big win.
Absolutely, yeah. It's couldn't be more contrast, I guess. Although I would say this. I know it's scorcher in Madrid at this time of year, but for the first time in several weeks in England, the sun is out.
Well, silver linings to yesterday.
I know, at least we've woken up with a little bit of sunshine. But, you know, football is for, you know, many other podcasts out there do football much better than us. But, you know, the flip side to that is we do event discussions much better than the football podcasts.
Definitely.
And that's why we're here today, to find out a little bit about your business, but find out a little bit about you. You are the founder of Beyond the Events, but maybe we should let's take steps back and maybe work chronologically a little bit. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you found your way into the events industry, Valentina.
Yeah, so if we go way back to when I was at university, which seems like a very long time ago, I did a degree which had a different name. It wasn't called events management. It was called organizing live arts, which seemed really fancy at the time. But really it was focused. I went to a kind of like a theatre drama college university. So a lot of it was focused on things that happen inside of theatres, stage productions, that kind of thing. But I didn't want to get into that. I wasn't one of those people who like to go to Broadway shows or West End shows or anything like that. So I kind of skewed away from that, still loving events, but didn't really want to do that. But if I go back a little bit more, I actually really loved events when I organized my school prom. That's when I knew. And actually, I wasn't meant to go to university to study events management. I was going to go and do IT. I wanted to be a computer programmer. And after that, and then not getting the grade that I wanted in IT, I was like, I don't want to do it. I want to do events. And I think I asked the university a week before everyone was going to start saying, can I come and do events management? And they were like, okay. So I kind of went into it like that. And then came out of university. It was hard to find a job at the time because this was 2009 maybe. And I actually went and left the UK and went to work on a cruise ship in the entertainment department, hosting the activities. So I wasn't organizing them at the time. I was just hosting them. So I was the people doing the trivia and the pool games and introducing acts on the stage. I did that for a number of years, in fact, almost 10 years on and off.
Sure.
And then the pandemic came and that changed things for us. I moved into the community world, which I'd kind of been doing a little bit before with Facebook groups, but a lot of the elements of community building involves events. So I was doing that for a while, and then actually last year I was like, you know what? I just want to do events, and I decided that I was going to step back from building online communities and just focus on how I can help people organize amazing events, and that's what's got me to today.
Your story sounds familiar. Is the best way to put it. Is so familiar to many people that I've spoken, and in fact my own pathway. And when I hear about your own experiences, the working on the cruise ships, dealing with the entertainment, going back to school, all of those experiences ultimately contribute, I'm certain, to the advice and the support and the assistance that you give to clients now, because you learn sort of fundamental elements that are key to all events, regardless of what they fall under. Is things like continuity, no awkward silences, keeping things moving. And I bet in the cruise ship world, just going back to sort of the entertainment side of things, you don't want to lose an audience for a second once you've got their attention. So I bet you learn really quickly how to keep things rolling, how to fill 30 seconds of dead air while the next act is getting set up or the technicians are changing stuff around. And I think all of those sort of skills that you learn in what seemingly unrelated roles, actually, for a lot of people I speak to who work in events, they actually reference loads of other experiences, say I learned bits and now that's what I do here. Is it very much the same for you?
Yeah, definitely. And it's weird that you mentioned the awkward silences, because that is something I cannot handle as an event manager. And even outside of events, if I'm sitting at a dinner table and no one is talking, I'm like, someone should be talking right now. You feel as the event person to strike that conversation or fill in with something. And it's weird that we're talking about this, because I was actually emceeing a virtual summit 2 years ago. And the speaker who I just introduced, we couldn't hear them, we couldn't see them. And it was a moment where I was like, well, what do we do? So I jumped in and did a whole session on something that I came up with in the moment, because that's just what we do. We come in and we in the moment, something just comes out of us. We don't know where it comes from, and we just talk or fix it, which is the beauty. And one of the secret weapons I think event people have is just being able to think on your feet and fix things very quickly.
And again, this is very much about you today, but hopefully throwing in some of my own experiences kind of will probably prompt you. But as a teenager, I got into playing live music. I picked up a guitar, started playing in bands, and that was kind of my thing for a few years. And then I had kids really young, in my early 20s, but then I got back into live music sort of in my later 20s. And I was always the person that would be able to talk down the microphone or fill that gap while somebody's tuning their guitar. And similarly, because of that in school, I was always the person that other bands would come to troubleshoot. We can't get this amplifier working. We don't know how this microphone works. How do we get this? And I was always the kid that somebody came to figure out how to plug something in. And that's exactly what I do now as a freelancer. I basically work in the sort of production element of things, liaising with an event manager and the AV teams to just troubleshoot and make sure stuff's built correctly, sorted. And so it's amazing how even like my experience as a teenager, I'm doing exactly the same thing now, sort of 30 years later, and doing something that I instinctively did when I was younger. And some of those experiences that I had when I was younger as well are still true today. So I always find that really, really sort of interesting how pathways kind of lead you back to things. And you've probably met loads of people yourself who work in events now, but didn't when they were fresh out of university.
No, definitely. And it's weird because I talk to a lot of people and ask them what did you do at university? And I feel like it's very uncommon for somebody to be doing their career is in what they did at university. Whereas I feel like I'm still doing it. I haven't really diverted around. And it's weird because you go to university a lot of the time not knowing what you want to do, which is why a lot of people do things like psychology or English there's two that come to mind. So I feel quite lucky that I found an industry that I really love, and that I guess I knew that very early on, because a lot of people go into various different industries over the course of their life, and they can be very different.
Do you think you've got to have a certain level of arrogance and ego to do the job that you do? And I mean that in a positive way, in the sense that, do you look at opportunities and think, I could do that so much better? I could really offer that client something so much better than they've got at the moment. And as I said, arrogance can often be deemed as a negative thing. But what I mean that is a level of confidence and arrogance, to parallel sport for a second. The best sportsmen have that level of confidence and arrogance that allows them to say, I can beat that opponent. And in the same way, you can say to a client, I can do that job better than your previous person did for you.
Definitely. I think it's all about knowing your ability and knowing what you can bring to the table. I'm not saying, saying you can do better. I know what I can bring to the table. I specialize in turning regular events into experiences, and I feel like that's a part of the events organizing process that maybe gets overlooked, because there isn't the resources, or people don't know how to really think about the little things. And those little things in events really take an event to the next level, which then gets people leaving feeling, oh my God, that was the most amazing event. They then tell people about it. People have got FOMO because they weren't there. So that's where I guess I feel like my strengths is to be able to bring that element in, which other people may not be able to, just because they don't have the time or the budget, or just they haven't got the experience in that. So I don't know if I would say I would make it better, but I would, but it's just different.
Yeah,
different in a good way.
A big budget doesn't necessarily bring you creativity.
No.
It's not an absolute cert that just because you've got budget you can have creativity. And similarly, the flip side to that is you don't need a big budget to be creative. I've seen really great events done on what could be argued as a shoestring budget, but just because there's a bit of thought in, even down to if you're doing a basic awards ceremony, choosing the right music so that it gives some context to certain winners, and if it's a particularly emotional award, picking a piece of music that the story of the award and the winner and the music combined in that moment forces an emotion onto people that they didn't even realize it was there. And you can do really simple things, can't you? And you don't need that big budget to be creative.
No, definitely not. And I do feel though that needs, when you're trying to be creative and create those really great experiences, you need a lot of thought to put into it, a lot of intention and purpose, which can take a while to really basically get in the zone and come up with that strategy. Whereas I feel like from a lot of events that I've seen, there's either one person organizing this event, or the event team is so big that we focus on a lot of logistics, which are very important, because without the logistics of an event, it can go down the drain. But that whole journey and emotion and unlocking the senses for attendees, like that is something that needs a little bit more thought, and that's why it doesn't always get the attention that it needs.
You just touched on something briefly there that highlighted an event that I worked on literally 10 days ago, where I was dealing with one person in the build up to it for this organization. It was an educational institute. It was a college, and it was a big kind of end of year seminar for 800 staff. And I was dealing with one person in the run up to it, which is great, because you ask a question on email, you get a response. You ask a question, you get a response. And as soon as we kind of got on site and the technical rehearsal started, suddenly all the senior management were there, and everybody wanted to have their opinion on elements. Is the stage high enough? Is the screen big enough? Is this, that, and the other? All things that probably should have been covered off well in advance. And again, just can you talk about your own experiences of working in that context? And I guess maybe how important it is to have for the client to have a clear vision so that you can do your job effectively as well.
Yeah, no, I've definitely had those situations where there's all the cooks in the kitchen, and they come from nowhere, but then they don't want to cook. They just want to tell you what they think that you should do. So I definitely feel that communication is really key when you're working with clients, and hopefully you're able to work with these clients over a longer period of time, because if you come on very close to when the event is, there's so much that happens in that run up to the event that it can be overwhelming for the event manager, first of all, to understand what's going on. And then obviously the client, because they've got, they've potentially got sponsors, they've got to keep happy, or hire executives. So what I try to do is work with people over a longer period of time. We outline everything. We do a lot of walkthroughs. So I go and visit the venues, or if it's a virtual platform, we do that obviously virtually, making sure that I love checklists. So I have checklists of checklists to make sure that we've covered off everything, and also documenting what you've agreed based on what they've said. So if they said, okay, I think the stage is too high, but you went to visit the venue together weeks ago and you agreed that, you say, well, actually, when we went to go and visit the venue 2 weeks ago, we saw this in person and we agreed that it was okay. Because I feel like if you don't document everything that is said, and that could be a document just for you so that you can refer back to them, you feel like you want to please the client by saying, yes, we can remove that. But then that you're no longer in control, that you've been brought on as the event manager to manage the event based on what their requirements are. So sometimes you do have to put your big shoes on and be like, you know what, that's not what we're doing because we discussed this. And that can be actually really hard. It's something I've been working on a lot, because I don't want to have confrontation with people over things, because they're paying me to do what they want me to do.
Absolutely,
You saying no is hard for us. I mean, saying no in general, I think in life is hard, because you don't want to say no to people. But making sure you communicate and document can really help alleviate those situations. If they do come, you know how to handle them.
And that's great advice for anybody listening. And it might seem really, really simple, but you're absolutely correct, because everybody has had that instance on a site somewhere where the client has said, oh, I thought we were doing that. And you said, no, we agreed that. Can you not remember that conversation that we had 3 months ago? And just that simple act of having that conversation and then following it up with an email to say, thanks for the time on the phone. Here's what we've just discussed. It just gives everybody, and it's not about being able to sort of ally, not blame, but where the buck stops. But it gives you that paper trail. It gives you that fallback. Say, look, we've got it here. It's documented. That's what we agreed, and that's what we've delivered. And there's a lot to be said for that. In a similar way, that I want to ask you: do you find that actually saying yes is great and easy, but actually if you find the right way to say no and have confidence in why you've said it, that actually brings a even higher level of respect to you as an event manager in terms of the perception the client has of you?
Yeah, no, definitely. It is about that confidence. And I would only say no if I'm sure that I believe that I'm saying no for the right reasons, because you could be saying no to something pretty big that may not work out, and then it comes back onto you. So you have to be, as the event manager, you have to make sure that you're very clear with yourself, very honest with yourself, that okay, if I say no, how is this going to impact the event that you're doing? Is it going to impact it or not? And assessing that. And okay, if it does impact it, like what are you going to do in the moment, depending what it is you're saying no to fix it? Because I feel like as event people, we are always 10 steps ahead. So I'm always thinking, okay, if we're doing this, okay, and then you're already counting on what else is happening. But also appearing confident can do wonders for you, especially if you are not 100% confident in saying no, but you believe it's the right thing to do. You have to just be like, you know what? I'm making a decision. This is, we're not doing this, or we agreed this, we're going to move forward with this. And then you sometimes you don't know what's going to happen, and you have to be confident. And again, you always have contingency plan in your head.
Big smile, deliver it with
big
confidence.
smile, and if it all goes well, then inside you're saying "told you so," and if it doesn't, then we fix it. That's it. That's what we do.
No, absolutely. Back up, and then a backup, and then a backup. Then another backup as well behind the backup of the backup. You again, something you touched on really briefly, but you mentioned whether it's live or hybrid events. Are you still doing a lot of online, digital, or sort of hybrid stuff? I know obviously that was a massive thing in the pandemic, and we kind of spoke about it till the cows came home on this podcast during that period of time. But how big a part does sort of the hybrid and online world play for you still now in 2024?
Yeah, so I do a lot of work within the community building industry because I have a big network there. And a lot of those communities are global communities. So a lot of them do want to get together online. There's still virtual summits happening, but they're also now in-person stuff as well. And I think a lot of people are kind of trying to do the hybrid approach. In my opinion, though, hybrid events, they are two separate events. So you need two event managers for. You can't have one event manager managing the in-person and this online part and trying to connect them together. So I tend not to work on many hybrid events, but what I have seen people doing is they do, like I'm working on this event again this year, which is the Modern Investor Summit, which is by a company called Finimize. I worked with them last year. They do 2 days online, and at the end of the second day, they do an in-person event, but it's not streamed anywhere. It's part of the whole summit, but it's not a hybrid event. But you can come to the in-person, but so it's
you don't have to.
You don't have to, but there is a chance for you to get together.
Sure, and I think the misleading, not maybe misleading is the wrong word, but the some of the terminology that we coined, maybe sort of pre-pandemic, but definitely during the pandemic of hybrid and online and everything. I think there was a period of time where we assumed that, or just felt that hybrid needed to be like a 50-50 split. It needed to be this sort of equal balance of online and in person. And I think the term hybrid in itself is, it can literally be just 5 minutes of online or one session that's online. That there is no rule to a hybrid event.
No.
And I think that's where a lot of people fell foul is how much effort do we put into the live, how much effort do we put into the online element. And I think it's taken a few years, but I think it's fair to say I think a lot of events have established what works for them. And just because a 50-50 split works for that particular event, it might be that a 20-80 split works for this particular hybrid element. Or like the clients you said, they do 2 days online and a small, maybe even a networking event just for those who can make it. So I think it's taken us a while to establish sort of what works. But I think, again, that's down to you as an event manager, I guess, of researching and talking to the client in advance of finding out, look, who are your audience, and then for you to guide them appropriately.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, it takes a lot of research. The amount of research that I do in general for events, whether it's platforms or catering or audio visual, the research is really, really important. But if I had a preference, I'm an in-person event girl. I just don't think you can replicate the experience that you can create in person online. There isn't a platform, in my opinion, that does it 100% well enough. Plus, I just love hearing the buzz in the room of an in-person event of all these tiny little groups having conversations. Whereas online, that's really hard to make happen because you can only really have maybe 2 or 3 people in a breakout room where they can talk together. Any more than that, people have to wait to talk. They can't have these side conversations. So as much as virtual events are still happening, and I still do them, in my opinion, in-person events are the best way to create that experience for attendees.
And I've used the restaurant analogy on many occasions, but you could order takeout from a restaurant and eat it, in your own at your own table or sat in your own sofa at home with the TV on. You could have exactly the same food, but in the restaurant, and the food tastes different. The experience of eating it is different because, to me, there's nothing better than a restaurant with that hum that
Mm-hmm.
hum of conversation, not
Yeah.
loud, not really quiet where everybody's whispering, but that hum of conversation that heightens the experience of the food. And that's exactly the same for a live event, like you said, that you
Definitely.
can't replicate when you sat like we are at the end of a camera or a computer screen.
Yeah, no, that it's like that noise that you don't really know what people are talking about, but you can tell that they're good conversations and people are smiling. You can even hear in people's tones when people are smiling or laughing without even being part of it. And that's one of the things that I love the most about what I do, is standing back at the back of a room at an in-person event, just watching people enjoying, networking, meeting people that they've maybe known for years online that they're meeting in person for the first time, or just connecting and learning about whatever the topic is that the theme of the event is. That is when I know that an event has gone well, is when you stand there and that's probably the only moment event managers have of like calmness, and that moment to just be like, and you hear that hum. Yeah, that.
And there's an instinctiveness where that things are going well, because you
Mm-hmm.
can, again, going back to not being able to replicate things online in the digital world, is that instant kind of just hunch that you get, that there's body language of people that you can see,
Yeah.
that right, they're having a positive conversation. The people walking around the show floor at a trade show are genuinely interested in being there, because you can tell by the way that they're looking around. You can tell by a conference audience that they're engaged in the speaker. You can't sense any of these things online. There's just that instinctiveness that you get when you're able to watch people moving around a space, as to how things are happening. One thing I'm curious to ask, if I may, today is whether or not you've carved out particular niches and sort of realized after a prolonged period of time of working on events that you kind of have an identity. You could tell one of your events from somebody else's because there's a certain identity that you always bring to it. Is that something that you found, or is every event completely different and unique, or do you sense that when you're working on something that there is that very much the stamp of your own sort of mark on it?
I would like to think so, but I don't know what that would be exactly. I guess that's something I need to go back and think about. But I definitely have found whenever there's an event that I can work on that's celebrating something, that's where I feel I excel.
Sure.
Just because the people that are attending this particular event are celebrating, whether it's an awards, whether it's a company launch or something. People are excited to be there, and that makes it easier for the event manager to plan the event. And because of that, I tend to find that I can the little moments that I can create at those particular events seem to go down better when people are there looking to celebrate with people.
Sure.
It can be quite difficult when you're working on an event where it's the subject matter is quite serious, I guess, where they're there to learn, to create those magic moments that are relevant to the topic, and also having a little bit of fun can be a little bit tricky to orchestrate and get creative so that it's related to the topic and the people that are there are going to enjoy them. So that's why I've now found my niche is celebrations. And I guess one of the things that I guess would stand out if you knew I was at an event is I'm also an MC and a host as well. So sometimes I'm also not only organizing the event, but emceeing the event as well, which probably shouldn't be doing because those are two very separate jobs. But I like to get myself really involved in the events. And sometimes I'll even speak at the event as well. So I'm there, even if I'm behind the scenes, I will also be out in the front, which I guess that comes from my customer service background where we're always used to being in the front. I mean, on the cruise ships, I was always on stage. Like I'm used to having the microphone, whereas a lot of event managers, they will never be the people that are on the stage introducing people because they do everything at the back or behind the scenes. But I guess where I'm different is I kind of switch between both sometimes.
I
So you're
wouldn't
definitely
necessarily
not on
use. I would disagree slightly with you saying that's where I'm
there.
different,
Okay.
because I've ended up in that situation a lot. By default, I'm always the voice of God, because if there's ever announcements at an event that I'm working on, I will always just say, right, I'll do that, because I know exactly what needs to be said at what time. I've always been happy with a microphone in my hand. And I've met so many other freelancers who similarly are more than happy to take hold of it. It's amazing when you wave a microphone towards a client and say, we need a voice of God. Can you just do the dinner announcement? Or can you, there's nothing scripted there to introduce the presenter on stage. Can you do, and they'll go, oh no, I don't want to go anywhere near that microphone. They said, right, I'll do that. And I've found so many other people in my experience who are really comfortable. And this is what, going back to the very, very start of this podcast today, and you're talking about those experiences where I said there's such familiarity there. I've met a lot of people who do exactly what you do, and it's not exclusive by any stretch. We all know a lot of good event organisers who don't want to go anywhere near the microphone or the stage, but what you've described is not necessarily maybe as unique as you may think, because I've seen a lot of it, and that's certainly my own experiences as well, where I've ended up, oh crap, the host for this stage is actually in a session somewhere else. We've got nobody introduce this next session. Right, no problem. I'll hop up. I'll do that, and I'll disappear. So I think again, it's a trait that professionals like yourself that work in the industry. I think you have that confidence, and because and I guess it's because you know the event so well, you instinctively know what needs to happen at what time, and I think that puts you probably in a great position to step up and do that.
Yeah, I guess from the way I see it is, I've never had a situation where someone's had to jump in and do an announcement without it being planned, because I'm always the one who would do it anyway. So there's never a moment of like, oh my God, we need someone to be the voice of God, because I've already decided that beforehand. I'm like, oh, well, I am the voice of God. So and I guess the other people that I've met in the events that I've done, and the event people that I'm currently connected with, none of them would be willing to take that microphone and get on. And maybe that's something that they want to work on, or it's just not something that they've needed to do in the past. I guess it only takes one time to be given that microphone, and you see how you go. And I don't know what it is about the microphone, but I love having it and speaking down it. I remember when I was a flight attendant, I used to make the announcements on the plane. Brilliant. I used to always volunteer to do that. I guess maybe I just like the sound of my own voice.
Well, you say that, but there is a certain art to it, and I find that. Do you find that you kind of flip a switch and you go from being the event manager and the organizer, and then you can flip a switch, go into that sort of presenting mode, and then flip a switch and go back to being the event manager?
Yeah, definitely.
It's a fascinating trait. Can I ask you very quickly before we wrap up?
Yeah.
Just it's a really sort of quick tech question, and it kind of, I suppose it's born out a little bit out of the experiences that we had during the pandemic and working on digital stuff. Do you find, has your experience in the last few years taken you to being able to use loads and loads of different platforms for different types of things? Or have you actually gone in the opposite direction, and having had experience of loads of different kind of tech platforms, gravitated towards a small sort of handful that you regularly use? And that you'll sort of deploy with clients. I'm talking things like digital Q&A, or event apps if they want an app. Which direction have you gone in? Loads, or a handful of select ones that you found work for you?
I think it goes like if this was the scale and this is loads and this is not that many. I mean, I'm still in the middle, because there are a lot of platforms out there that you can use that all do essentially the same thing, but have their unique selling points. So depending on the client and what they're looking for will depend which platform we use. And that in a space of X amount of events, I could be using 10 different platforms for different things, because this one might not connect with this one, but this one Obviously, you've got to look at the pricing as well, depending on the budget and what they're looking for. So I do feel like I'm working with a lot of different ones, which is great, because for me, it means that I have more knowledge about what they can do, because you look at a platform and if you haven't used it before, it's really hard to recommend it. But if you've used it on an event, you can say, well, actually, I did this event. It was really great for this. It wasn't great for this. And it gives you that experience. So yeah, I'm still working with a lot. And I quite like it, if I'm honest.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I've heard two different answers to that. You know, some people say, no, I used loads during sort of 2020, 21, and I've gravitated towards these because they work for me. But that might be that they work with a particular client set that tend to all require similar types of traits from their platforms, so they can do that. If you're working with a broader spectrum of clients, you know, you need that adaptability. You need different options for different requirements, don't you? So you've got to have that palette available to you. Interesting. I always love asking that question because, you know, I remember having podcast conversations in late 2020 and early 21 and thinking, oh, I wonder what it's going to be like in 3 years' time and which direction people will have gone in. So it's always great to hear that. We are pretty much sort of coming towards the end of time on today's episode. It's flown past. I'm looking at the clock. And,
it has.
You know, we're well past 35 minutes and, you know, in some respects feel like we've only sort of scratched the surface of a conversation. But we've been talking today to the founder of Beyond the Event, Valentina Ruffoni, who's joined us from their spectacular studio in Madrid this morning. Before we go, Valentina, it's important that we give the opportunity to anybody who's listening to today or watching today to get in touch with you. If they want to find out a bit more about you or maybe speak to you about their events that they've got coming up and maybe, you know, tap into a little bit of your expertise, how will they find you?
Yeah, you can find me at beyondtheevent.co, or I'm very active on LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn. You can find me on there. There's not many Valentina Ruffonis on LinkedIn, so you should find me quite easily. But yeah, reach out. I'm happy to get on a call. I share a lot of resources around events management, and yeah, happy to get to know people better.
It's been great to have the conversation with you today. Thanks very much for taking this a bit of time out at the start of a week as well. We often record on a Monday, so I'm always grateful to all of our guests because, you know, recording and diving into a podcast first thing on a Monday morning is not often the best thing to see in your diary, but you know, that tends to be when we record them, and I'm always grateful to our guests for sort of taking that little bit of time out of the start of a busy week. Before we wrap up, just a couple of mentions for our own stuff at this end. Of course, if you are working with the events industry and you're looking for a supplier or a service within the events industry, please do go to eventindustrynews.com and search for the A to Z supplier directory. A huge comprehensive range of suppliers and options there for anything that you're looking for, whether it's a tech platform, an AV company, a venue. It can probably be found within the A to Z supplier directory on eventindustrynews.com, where if you are listening to today's podcast, you can also find video versions of all of the podcasts on the website. The flip side to that, of course, is that you may already be on the website and you're watching today's video version. Thank you very much for joining us if you have done that. And don't forget to go in the opposite direction and make sure that you subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts from. It helps us out and it means that you get notified then of any new episodes that drop as and when they do. And a little shout out again, I'm pretty sure that for Event Tech Live in November and Event Sustainability Live, returning to London XL, the submissions are open. So anybody that's listening to the podcast that wants to apply to speak at either Event Tech Live or Event Sustainability Live at XL London in November, then the submissions are open. If you just go to the website, either Event Tech Live or Event Sustainability Live, you can click the button and submit any session ideas that you may want to put forward to the team organising those events. So thanks very much to everybody for joining us today. Thanks again to my guest, Valentina Ruffoni from Beyond the Event, and we'll see you on the next edition of the podcast. Thanks, everybody.